Hi, my name is Louis Lazarus, and this is going to be just a quick screencast demonstrating some things using CSS positioning. So I'll be working here on a website called CodePen. If you've never heard of it, you can visit it at codepen.io. It lets you basically edit HTML, CSS, and JavaScript on the fly right on the page here without needing any text editor or having to upload files to the server and so forth. So it's a nice place to do some testing and experimenting. So the page I'm going to be dealing with here has just 3 green boxes with 3 other boxes inside of each of the green boxes. And you can see the HTML here. I have a wrapper element that basically holds these in place so that they're centered on the page there. And then each of the box elements has HTML that looks like that, the part that I've highlighted there, and then you'll see the child element inside of each. So they're called box 1, box 2, and box 3, and then the child elements are called child 1, child 2, and child 3 using class names. So we'll deal with the HTML a little bit later in the screencast, but for now I'll just turn off that panel so we can just have the CSS in view. Let's start off first by dealing with this first box here. Now if I scroll down the CSS a bit so you can see the styles associated with box 1 and child 1, let's just demonstrate what's happening here with regards to the box. So if I was to remove these styles, the position relative and position absolute, you wouldn't see anything happen because, well, they're just in their default locations. So simply giving them absolute or relative positioning doesn't normally have any effect. Now, since the child element is positioned absolutely, let's see what we can do to move this element. So if we give it a top property of 30 pixels and then say a left property of 40 pixels, you'll see that the small box element inside of the bigger box element, or the child element inside the box element, actually moves. So now it's positioned absolutely, and it's positioned 30 pixels from the top of the box 1 element and 40 pixels from the left of the edge of the box 1 element. Now that only happens because I've set position relative on the box 1 element, which is the parent element. So basically the absolute positioning looks for, as long as you have top and left values set, or you could also have right and bottom values set. Those are also acceptable in using with absolute positioning. But in this case we'll just use top and left. Basically this element, when it's absolutely positioned with offsets, it will be looking for the closest relatively positioned parent to decide where to offset it. So if I were to remove this position relative and just give it the default value of position static, now you'll notice that the small box pops up into the top left corner here. Now, since there is no relatively positioned parent, that child element is positioning itself relative to the whole window, or what's called the viewport. So that's basically how absolute positioning works. So just in summary there, you have to have a positioning context in order to position the element. Otherwise it will be positioned relative to the page. So normally, in most cases, you won't be, and you can have the same effect if you just delete this entire line here. It basically stays exactly where it is because position static is the default for pretty much every element on a page. I'll just put the relative positioning back there and we'll leave that box there. So now we'll deal with the second box here, the second green box and the second little box, and that's box 2 and child 2. And I'll just demonstrate a little trick that's good to know with regards to absolute positioning. So now we know that this box is positioned absolutely in relation to its parent box, box 2. We haven't set the offsets though. So let's do a little trick now to make this inside box get the exact same width and height of its parent box. So if we look up here, we'll see that the parent box is set. This value is set for all of the parent boxes, and you'll see it's set to width 200 pixels by height 200 pixels. The smaller boxes, though, are set to width and height 50 pixels. So the first thing we're going to do is override the width back to its default, which is auto. So now you'll see that it gets no width because it doesn't have any content in it. But now we want to make it automatically fit inside of its container. So we can do that by a little trick using the top, right, left, and bottom values. And watch what happens. Now, okay, and so you'll notice that the width expanded to fit the container, and I forgot to set the height to auto as well, so it was using the 50 pixel height. So now that smaller box automatically fits its container, the parent container. So the reason that happens is basically because the top, right, and left, and bottom values are telling it where to position the box. If we only set the top and, say, the left values, then nothing would happen. It wouldn't have any value because now it's just, it has a point to start from at the top left, but it doesn't have a point anywhere else to widen out or enlarge in that box. If we set, even if we set the bottom to 0 to reset that, then it would also disappear unless we had content in here in the smaller box. So that's just a little trick that's good to know. It can come in handy for centering items. You can do something like right 20%, left 20%, and then it'll kind of center the element in there even though it's absolutely positioned. So you can kind of fiddle around with those types of things as well. And keep in mind as well that positioned elements, absolutely positioned elements, are not in the page flow. So if I were to add more content inside these first two green boxes here, or even the third box, because they're all positioned absolutely, the small boxes, then that content would act as if these three smaller boxes were not even there. So absolute positioning isn't for everything. It's only usually for small things or small little modules on your page where you want to position something in an exact spot and it's not dependent on other content or other things bumping up against it and so forth. So finally, with this third green box here and the other little box inside it, we're going to demonstrate just quickly fixed positioning. Again, we have position relative on the parent green box, and then on the child element we've set it to position fixed. Now nothing's happened because we haven't set any offsets, but if we do top 0 and then right, say 20 pixels, then you'll notice that the box jumps to the top right corner of the page here again. Maybe if we pushed it off the top a little bit so you can see. And so now it's fixed, very similar to absolute positioning, but the difference is that it's fixed in place. So to demonstrate the fixed positioning, we have to go back to our HTML. We'll just leave the CSS in view there. We'll go back to the HTML, and I have some dummy HTML positioned below these three boxes, and I'll just take out the HTML comment here that was making that disappear from view, and now you'll notice that we have a scroll bar here on the right side of the page. So this fixed position box, keep an eye on that as I scroll the page. That box stays positioned, and you've probably seen that on many websites before where they might have some sort of a promo thing there, or maybe even a navigation bar or a share link or a feedback form, whatever it is. So that's basically how they do fixed positioning. So you scroll the page and that stays fixed in place. So that's just a quick recap of a lot of the content that you probably just saw in the accompanying article. And if you want to fiddle around with this, you can fiddle around with the demonstrations on the page here or this demonstration as well, which I'll link to in the article.